Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really vital aspect of recovery from substance use, how to actively cultivate positivity.
Mm-hmm.
We know that path, to sobriety isn't always smooth sailing. It can often involve, well, periods of significant negativity and that really frustrating lack of enjoyment, what's often called anhedonia.
That's right, yeah. Navigating recovery involves such a complex mix of emotions and that difficult, experiencing pleasure or finding interest in things you once enjoyed. That's a very real and often really challenging experience for people.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we're drawing on a pretty helpful resource.
Yeah.
It's a self-help course titled Finding Your Path to Positivity.
Okay.
Our aim today really is to extract the core insights and the really useful tools that can help you build a stronger sense of well-being as you move through recovery.
That sounds great.
Now, it's so important to understand right off the bat. This isn't about like putting on a fake smile or pretending everything is perfect. We're definitely not talking about that toxic positivity that sometimes gets talked about.
Absolutely not. No, this is about learning practical skills, real concrete strategies for shifting your perspective and developing a more positive inner state, even when you're facing ongoing difficulties.
And what's really encouraging, I think, is that this approach aligns so well with established ideas about recovery, like Sam HSC's principles,
Yeah.
which emphasize things like hope and having a sense of purpose.
Exactly. And at its heart, it's based on a really powerful understanding of how our brains work, this concept of neuroplasticity,
Right.
which is just the brain's remarkable ability to change and adapt. And that offers genuine hope, hope for healing and for creating new positive patterns.
Okay, let's really get into this then. The course begins by helping us understand the common challenges people face in recovery. And, well, one of the first things it addresses is that term, anhedonia. What exactly is happening there?
Well, anhedonia, this loss of interest and pleasure, it has a pretty significant biological basis, especially when we're talking about recovery from substance use. See, many substances drastically increase dopamine levels in the brain, which is, a key neurotransmitter in our reward system.
Right, the pleasure chemical.
Kind of, yeah. So when that substance use stops, the brain can have a really tough time naturally regulating dopamine. And that leads to this period where things just don't feel as enjoyable or motivating.
So it's not just a case of someone feeling a bit down or unmotivated. There are actual changes happening chemically in the brain.
Precisely, yeah. The symptoms can show up as like a lack of emotional response even to things that used to bring happiness, or pulling away from social activities, feeling constantly tired, even changes in appetite sometimes. And the course makes a really crucial point here. This isn't some kind of personal weakness or a sign of failure. It's often a symptom of the brain healing and just trying to find its balance again.
That's such a vital point to make, because feeling like you should be enjoying things, maybe in early recovery, and then just not being able to, that must be incredibly disheartening.
Oh, it can be very frustrating, definitely. And it can also impact someone's motivation to stay engaged in their recovery process. Makes it harder to imagine a fulfilling life without substance use, right?
Yeah.
So understanding the biological side of it can really foster self-compassion, encourage people to keep trying healthy activities, even if they don't get that immediate reward they might be expecting,
Right. Patience with the process.
Yeah.
The course also digs into negative thinking patterns, those cognitive distortions that can really cloud how we see things.
Yes, these are those sort of irrational or exaggerated ways our minds can interpret what's happening around us. The course gives some really common examples. One is catastrophizing, where your mind immediately jumps to the absolute worst case scenario.
Oh, I definitely recognize that one. Like, I haven't heard back about that job application. My entire career is doomed. That kind of thing.
Exactly like that. Or another one is disqualifying the positive, where you just dismiss compliments or successes as if they don't really count. Someone might say, oh, anyone could have done that, even if they put in a lot of effort.
Right. Undermining yourself.
Yeah. And then there's negative labeling, where you define yourself based on mistakes you've made in the past.
Like that harsh inner voice just saying, you're just an addict, or you're just lazy, you'll never be any different.
Precisely. And the course emphasizes, look, these aren't objective facts. They're patterns of thinking that we've often learned over time. And the good news is, because they're learned, we actually have the capacity to unlearn them and develop healthier ways of thinking.
Which really connects to the role of stress and trauma in substance use, doesn't it? Because those experiences can significantly shape our thinking patterns and how we react emotionally.
Absolutely. The link between trauma, chronic stress, and substance use disorders, or SUDs, it's really significant. Trauma can actually alter the brain's stress response system, making individuals, well, more easily triggered. And as we've already touched on, recovery itself can be a period of significant stress. So the course highlights how principles like mindfulness and cognitive restructuring, which we'll definitely talk more about later, can be incredibly helpful in managing those really intense emotions.
Okay, so we've looked at some of the challenges. Now, the course shifts to the why.
Yeah.
The why behind cultivating positivity in recovery. And it brings in Sam H.'s definition of recovery. For anyone unfamiliar, Sam H.'s is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Yeah, and Sam H.'s defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential.
Okay.
So positivity isn't just some nice extra. It's actually a key component of achieving those bigger, broader goals of recovery.
And a huge part of that why is hope, isn't it? That's one of Sam H.'s core principles, that belief in the possibility of recovery.
Exactly. Hope. That fundamental belief that recovery is possible and that a better future is within reach. It's really the engine, that keeps people moving forward, even when they hit obstacles. This course really grounds its whole approach in that principle of hope.
And then there's purpose. That feels so incredibly important, especially when you're rebuilding your life in recovery.
It truly is. Sam H.'s identifies having a sense of purpose as a key dimension of recovery. That means engaging in meaningful daily activities, whether that's through work or creative expression, or maybe just contributing to your community.
Right.
The course emphasizes that a lack of purpose can actually be linked to poorer outcomes in recovery. So cultivating a sense of purpose gives you direction, motivation, and a really strong reason to keep moving forward.
It's like having a compass, isn't it? Guiding you towards something meaningful, rather than just constantly trying to steer clear of the negative stuff. What kind of pathways to finding purpose does the course mention?
It suggests a variety of avenues, like pursuing work or a career, engaging in creative outlets, maybe connecting with your spiritual side, and perhaps most profoundly for many people, finding ways to be of service to others.
Yeah.
That feeling of making a contribution can be incredibly meaningful and really rewarding.
Now, this next concept is really interesting. Understanding our natural emotional baselines through this idea of hedonic adaptation. It's often called the hedonic treadmill. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, basically it's our innate tendency to return to a relatively stable level of happiness over time, regardless of, positive or negative things that might happen in our lives.
Okay.
Think about people who win the lottery. Their initial joy is often, huge, immense. But research indicates they often return to their previous levels of happiness within maybe a year or so.
So even that incredible high from a massive positive event eventually just fades back to a kind of emotional normal.
Exactly. We adapt. We tend to adapt to new homes, even adapt to recovering from injuries. The course uses a really relatable example. The first bite of a delicious meal is usually the most pleasurable, right?
Definitely.
So this has really important implications for recovery. Constantly chasing those fleeting pleasures, like maybe that initial excitement in early sobriety, well, that isn't a sustainable way to achieve long-term well-being.
So when that initial honeymoon phase of sobriety starts to wear off, it's not necessarily a sign that things are going wrong. It's just a natural part of being human. Adaptation.
Precisely. Understanding and just normalizing this process of adaptation can really help manage expectations. It encourages us to look beyond those temporary highs and focus on cultivating more enduring sources of well-being, which, we'll explore in more detail later on.
All right, module 2 of the course. This is all about actively building a positive mindset. And it kicks off with a really empowering concept. The brain's incredible power to change through neuroplasticity.
This is a truly transformative idea, honestly. For a long time, the understanding was that the adult brain was pretty much fixed, set in its structure.
Right.
But neuroplasticity reveals that our brains can actually reorganize themselves throughout our lives. It happens in response to our experiences, what we learn, even our thoughts.
So those changes that maybe substance use brought about in the brain,
Yeah.
they aren't necessarily permanent. They're not unchangeable.
That's absolutely right. As we engage in new healthy behaviors and adopt more positive thought patterns in recovery, the brain literally begins to form new neural connections and strengthen the positive ones. It's the the biological mechanism that underpins healing and the development of those positive habits.
Wow.
So engaging in therapy, learning new skills, practicing mindfulness, these are all activities that can actually contribute to these positive changes in the brain.
It really puts the scientific backing behind the idea of hope, doesn't it?
Right.
It's not just wishful thinking. Our brains are actually wired for this kind of adaptation and growth.
Exactly. And the course then connects this biological capacity for change to the psychological concept of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Could you maybe explain the difference between those two?
Sure. A fixed mindset is basically the belief that your abilities and intelligence are largely set in stone. Like, you've got what you've got. People with this mindset often tend to avoid challenges because they're afraid of failing,
Right.
kind of confirming what they see as their limitations. They might also give up more easily when things get tough.
Right. And a growth mindset is the opposite. It's the belief that you can develop your abilities and intelligence through dedication, effort, and learning.
Hmm.
People with a growth mindset tend to embrace challenges as opportunities to learn and grow. They see effort as the path to mastery, and they're generally more resilient when they face setbacks.
Okay, and how does having that growth mindset connect with neuroplasticity then?
Well, the course highlights that neuroplasticity isn't like a passive process. It doesn't just happen. The brain changes based on what we repeatedly do and think. So, if you have a growth mindset, if you genuinely believe that you can learn new coping skills to manage cravings, for example, you're much more likely to actually engage in the activities that will drive those positive neuroplastic changes in your brain. It creates this really powerful positive cycle.
That makes sense. The course then includes an activity where you reflect on a time when you successfully learned something difficult. Why is that kind of reflection valuable in, context of recovery?
It's about consciously recalling those past experiences where you did demonstrate your ability to learn and adapt. This helps to strengthen your belief in your own capacity to learn and grow, which is just so essential for navigating the challenges of recovery. You've overcome learning curves before in your life.
Right.
You have that inherent ability to learn and adapt to new situations.
Right, reminding yourself you can do hard things. Now we move into the section on reshaping our thoughts, and this is where the course introduces some really practical tools that come from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Yes, CBT. It's a really effective approach, often used in addiction treatment. It focuses on that powerful connection between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors.
Okay.
Basically, negative or distorted thought patterns can lead to negative emotions and, well, unhelpful actions. The goal here isn't to, force yourself to think happy thoughts all the time.
Right, not toxic positivity again.
Exactly. It's about developing more realistic, balanced, and constructive ways of thinking.
And the first step in doing that is becoming aware of those negative automatic thoughts, or NATs, and those kind of sneaky cognitive distortions that often underlie them.
Precisely. NATs are those thoughts that just sort of pop into your head automatically, often with a negative bias. And these thoughts, they often reflect those underlying cognitive distortions we talked about earlier, things like always assuming the worst or dismissing anything positive. The course provides a pretty helpful overview of many of these common distortions.
Okay. And to help us become more aware of these thoughts and distortions, the course introduces the idea of keeping a thought record. How does that actually work?
A thought record is essentially a structured way to track your thoughts and the situations they pop up in. Typically, you'll have columns to note down, like the situation that triggered a particular feeling, the feeling itself, and maybe how intense it was.
Great.
The specific automatic thoughts that went through your mind at that time, and then, importantly, identifying which cognitive distortions might be at play in those thoughts.
So it's like taking your thoughts and examining them under a microscope almost, noticing patterns you might not have been consciously aware of before.
Exactly. It helps you to start seeing your thoughts as just mental events, rather than absolute truths or facts. And then the crucial next step is learning how to challenge and restructure those thoughts.
So once you've identified a negative thought and maybe the distortion that's fueling it, what do you actually do to change it?
Well, you start to question it, almost like a detective gathering evidence. You ask yourself, what evidence do I actually have to support this thought? What evidence contradicts it? Are there other possible explanations for what happened? If a friend were having this exact same thought, what advice would I give them?
That's a good one.
Yeah. The goal is basically to replace that distorted thought with a thought that is more balanced, more realistic, and ultimately more helpful.
And the thought record itself evolves at this stage, right? You add columns where you actively challenge the negative thought and come up with a more balanced, realistic alternative.
Exactly. And then you even go back and re-rate the intensity of your initial feeling after you've worked on challenging the thought. It can be really insightful to see just how much your thoughts actually influence your emotions.
Yeah.
The course also introduces the idea of positive reframing, actively looking for those silver linings or potential positive aspects, even in difficult situations.
That can feel really challenging sometimes, though,
Yeah.
especially when you're right in the middle of a tough experience.
It definitely takes practice, no doubt. It's not about denying the difficulty of the situation, but about consciously training your mind to also look for any potential positives. What can you learn from this? What strengths might you be developing as a result? That kind of thing.
Okay. Module 2 then shifts its focus to uncovering our inner resources, moving away from just focusing on what might be wrong and instead highlighting our inherent strengths.
Yeah.
This draws on principles of positive psychology.
Yeah, this is where positive psychology offers a really valuable perspective. Instead of solely focusing on deficits or weaknesses, it encourages us to identify and cultivate our innate positive qualities.
Yeah.
The course introduces the VIA classification,
Okay.
which is a framework that outlines 24 character strengths organized under 6 overarching virtues like kindness, bravery, hope, perseverance, things like that.
And how can understanding and, utilizing our character strengths actually be helpful in recovery?
Well, research consistently shows that when people are aware of and use their strengths, they tend to experience greater happiness, higher self-esteem, and reduced levels of stress.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So in recovery, these strengths become incredibly valuable resources for coping with challenges like cravings, for staying committed to your goals, and for building a more positive sense of self. It really helps to counteract that negative self-labeling that can be so damaging to self-esteem.
Right. The course includes some specific activities for helping you identify your strengths, like reflecting on times in your life when you felt particularly alive or proud of yourself.
Yes, that kind of self-reflection can really help you pinpoint what positive qualities you were drawing upon in those moments. The course also suggests seeking feedback from people you trust, as they often see strengths in us that we ourselves might overlook.
That's true.
And it encourages using a list of these character strengths as a kind of guide to help you name and recognize your own positive qualities.
There's also an interesting activity mentioned called 3 Good People. How does that one work?
Right. For this activity, you think of 3 people you genuinely admire, and you identify the specific positive qualities or character strengths that you see in them. Then you take some time to reflect on how you might also possess or express those same strengths in your own life. It's a way of recognizing your own positive attributes by seeing them kind of mirrored in others you admire.
That's a neat idea. And then, crucially, the course emphasizes the importance of intentionally using your strengths in the context of your recovery.
Exactly. It's not enough to just know what your strengths are. You need to actively look for opportunities to apply them to the tasks and challenges of your recovery.
Like what?
Well, whether that's developing coping strategies for cravings or actively participating in treatment or working on rebuilding relationships. This creates a really positive feedback loop. Using your strengths leads to positive outcomes, which in turn boosts your sense of self-efficacy and confidence. The course even provides an activity for developing a strengths use plan for the upcoming week.
That sounds very practical. The final part of Module 2 focuses on healing with kindness, really emphasizing the importance of self-compassion and forgiveness. These feel like such crucial elements, particularly in the context of recovery, which can be, well, so challenging.
They're absolutely fundamental. Recovery is rarely a completely smooth journey, right? There are often setbacks and difficult moments along the way. Self-compassion is about treating yourself with the same level of kindness, understanding, and patience that you would offer to a friend who is going through a difficult time.
Instead of beating yourself up.
Exactly, instead of resorting to harsh self-criticism and judgment.
The course breaks down self-compassion into 3 key components. Can you remind us of what those are?
Sure. The 3 components are self-kindness versus self-judgment. That's about being gentle and understanding with yourself instead of critical. Then there's recognizing our common humanity versus feeling isolated and alone in our struggles. And finally, practicing mindfulness, which involves acknowledging painful thoughts and feelings without over-identifying with them, without getting totally swept away. It's about acknowledging the difficulty without getting consumed by shame.
And it's important to distinguish self-compassion from self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
Because self-esteem can sometimes be a bit fragile, maybe dependent on external stuff.
Exactly. Self-esteem often relies on external validation or achievements. Self-compassion, on the other hand, is available to you even when you feel like you've fallen short or made mistakes.
Okay.
The course offers some really practical exercises to cultivate self-compassion, such as consciously reframing negative self-talk with kinder and more realistic language, and a self-compassion break technique that you can use right in moments of difficulty.
There's also the practice of loving kindness meditation that's specifically directed towards oneself.
Yeah.
How can that be beneficial?
Right. It's a practice where you actively cultivate feelings of warmth and kindness towards yourself by repeating positive phrases like, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be safe, and may I be peaceful. Over time, consistently engaging in this type of meditation can actually strengthen the neural pathways in your brain associated with positive self-regard. It helps to counteract ingrained patterns of negativity through that neuroplasticity we talked about.
And then the often complex topic of forgiveness comes up. That could be a really loaded word for many people in recovery.
It certainly can be, yeah. The Course makes it really clear that forgiveness isn't about condoning harmful behavior or, forgetting what happened.
Right.
Instead, it's about letting go of resentment and the desire for revenge, whether that's directed towards yourself or towards others. It's really an internal process of releasing the painful grip that the past can have on the present.
So it's ultimately about freeing yourself from that burden of resentment.
Precisely. Holding on to resentment can be incredibly emotionally draining and can really hinder your progress in recovery. Forgiveness, on the other hand, can help to heal emotional pain, reduce feelings of shame and guilt, and ultimately allow you to move forward in a more peaceful way. The Course emphasizes that forgiveness is a process. It often takes time, and it requires self-compassion. It offers some helpful journaling prompts to guide that reflection.
Okay. Module 3 then shifts the focus to actually implementing these concepts and tools in our daily lives. It starts with actively cultivating positive feelings, which makes perfect sense after our earlier discussion about anhedonia.
Yes, exactly. It's about actively working to counteract that emotional flatness that can be so common. The Course really highlights the power of gratitude, consciously recognizing and appreciating the good things in your life, no matter how small they might seem.
And there are specific gratitude practices that the Course suggests, like keeping a gratitude journal and practicing the 3 good things exercise.
Exactly. Keeping a gratitude journal involves regularly writing down specific things you're grateful for and reflecting on why you appreciate them. The 3 good things exercise is a nightly reflection where you identify 3 positive events that happened during the day, and crucially, you explore why you think those things occurred.
Why the why?
Well, the why helps to reinforce your sense of agency, or maybe recognize the kindness of others, or just fortunate circumstances. It connects things together. And research has actually shown that these practices can have a significant positive impact on overall well-being.
The Course also talks about actively learning to savor positive experiences. What does that involve?
Savoring is about intentionally paying attention to and amplifying positive moments as they happen,
Right.
really soaking them in and appreciating them fully instead of just letting them pass by unnoticed.
Okay.
This can involve savoring positive memories from the past, fully engaging in the present moment, or even looking forward with anticipation to enjoyable events in the future.
How do you do that practically?
Well, the Course suggests various strategies like sharing the experience with someone, consciously building mental memories of it, focusing on all your senses, maybe offering yourself self-congratulations for positive outcomes, becoming fully absorbed in the moment, or even expressing your enjoyment outwardly, like smiling or laughing.
There's an activity suggested called a savoring walk, which sounds like a really nice, simple way to practice this.
It is. It's about taking a slow walk and intentionally focusing your attention on the pleasant sensory details around you, the way the sun feels on your skin, the sounds of nature, the beauty of your surroundings, and really lingering on those sensations, reflecting on how they make you feel. The Course also reminds us to actively generate other positive emotions like joy, interest, hope, serenity, amusement, by engaging in activities we enjoy and connecting with supportive people. This connects to the broaden and build theory,
Right.
which suggests that positive emotions can actually help to build our personal resources over time. Resilience, social connections, things like that.
Gotcha. The next section focuses on the concept of being present through mindfulness. This feels particularly relevant in recovery for, managing cravings and navigating difficult emotions.
Absolutely. Mindfulness is essentially about paying attention to the present moment with a sense of non-judgmental awareness and acceptance. The Course outlines the core principles: focusing on the present, cultivating awareness, and practicing acceptance without judgment. It highlights the many benefits of mindfulness in recovery, like reducing stress, helping to manage cravings, decreasing that tendency to avoid difficult experiences.
Experiential avoidance, yeah.
Right, improving self-awareness and interrupting the sort of automatic, maladaptive responses.
And it introduces some foundational mindfulness practices that people can start with, like mindful breathing and body scan meditations.
Yes, these are fundamental practices. They help you to anchor yourself in the present moment and develop a greater awareness of your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without getting carried away by them.
Right.
The course also specifically addresses how to use mindfulness to navigate cravings and difficult emotions, learning to observe them with that non-judgmental awareness, seeing them as temporary waves rather than feeling the need to immediately react.
Create some space.
Exactly. It creates that crucial space between an urge or a feeling and your action.
Module 3 then transitions into the idea of living with intention, which is really about building a life that aligns with your core values.
Exactly. Recovery isn't just about stopping substance use. It's about actively creating a meaningful and fulfilling life. The course emphasizes the importance of exploring your core values, those fundamental principles that guide your decisions and give your life direction. There's a values clarification exercise provided to help you identify what's truly important to you.
And once you have a clearer sense of your values, how do you then connect with activities that feel purposeful?
Well, it's about consciously brainstorming activities that align with those core values and also draw upon your strengths.
Okay.
The course gives examples like maybe volunteering if connection and compassion are important values for you, or engaging in creative hobbies if creativity is something you value. It encourages starting small and focusing on activities that feel genuinely meaningful to you personally.
There's also an interesting exercise called Best Possible Self, which sounds like a powerful way to create a positive vision for the future.
It is a really helpful tool, yeah. You vividly imagine yourself in the future, maybe 1 to 5 years from now, having achieved your goals and living in a way that reflects your full potential.
So you really picture it.
Yeah, the exercise involves writing a detailed description of this future best possible self. What you're doing, who you're with, how you're feeling. This kind of mental rehearsal can actually strengthen the neural pathways associated with your goals and significantly increase your motivation and sense of hope. It helps counteract feelings of hopelessness. And the course also reminds us, again, of the vital role that community and connection play in finding purpose and sustaining long-term recovery.
Right, that SAM-HSA dimension. The final section of Module 3 focuses on how to sustain well-being over the long term, touching on this concept of eudaimonia and strategies for mitigating hedonic adaptation.
Yes, it's about moving beyond simply seeking fleeting pleasure, that hedonic treadmill, to cultivating a deeper, more sustainable sense of fulfillment and meaning in your life. That's eudaimonia. The course revisits the idea of hedonic adaptation and offers practical strategies to help slow it down, like introducing variety into enjoyable activities, consistently practicing gratitude and savoring, cultivating mindfulness, and investing in meaningful social connections.
And then it introduces the concept of eudaimonic well-being itself, finding happiness and fulfillment through meaning, purpose, and personal growth.
Exactly. It's about living in a way that feels authentic and contributes to your own personal growth and self-realization. The course emphasizes that this type of well-being tends to be more resilient, more sustainable than just chasing pleasure. And it aligns very well with SAM-HS's broader goals for recovery, which include self-direction and reaching your full potential. It concludes with an activity focused on planning eudaimonic activities that align with your values and strengths.
So as we bring this all together in our outro, this deep dive has really highlighted that recovery and the active cultivation of positivity are these ongoing dynamic processes, not just a destination.
Absolutely. It's definitely not a linear path, and there will inevitably be ups and downs. Remembering the importance of self-compassion, especially during challenging times, is absolutely key. Cannot stress that enough.
And to help make this learning really stick and become practical, the course concludes with a very useful activity, creating your own personalized positivity toolkit.
Yes, it encourages you to reflect on all the different practices and concepts that we've discussed, throughout the course material, and to choose the ones that resonate most strongly with you. It even provides a template to help you outline these practices, how often you plan to use them, and any personal notes or reflections that might be helpful.
So it's like creating your own customized set of tools and strategies for navigating your specific recovery journey.
Precisely. And even incorporating just a few of these practices on a regular basis can make a really significant difference in your overall well-being over time. And importantly, the course wisely reminds listeners of the ongoing importance of seeking out and engaging with the supportive resources, peer support, therapy, sponsors, whatever works for you in their recovery journey.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the final thought I'm left with, and I guess I hope you are too, is this. Truly believe in your own capacity for growth and in your ability to create a deeply fulfilling and positive life in recovery.